When we took office in May of 2011, only 33% of Kansas City's third graders were reading at grade level. And that is the entirety of Kansas City, Missouri, not just one school district. We were working with the National League of Cities and learned about how third grade reading proficiency is so intertwined and interconnected with longer term educational access. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to understand that the more enriching educational opportunities that children have, the less likely they are to enter a life of crime, less likely they are to live in poverty, and more likely they are to have more workforce opportunities. So Sly caught a lot of flack at the beginning of his administration for having such a focus on education. And his detractors would say, you need to focus on potholes and trash pickup. And our motto in the mayor's office was name one thing that is not impacted by this city's kids' education level.
In a corporate world where all employees have great leaders with no egos that create fun cultures where people can do their best work, the employees and companies thrive while doing great things for the customers, themselves, and each other.
Well, we know that rarely happens. I'm Jeff Palacio. I have been a leader for over 40 years for every t-shirt size company, from small 16 employees to extra large over 1 million. Please join me while I interview outstanding leaders that will share stories of great leadership and not so great. It will help you become a better leader while poking fun about all the crazy shit that happens in corporate America.
Hi, I'm Joe Deshawn, and welcome to the Corporate Couch with Jeff Palacio. Today's episode is brought to you by Palacio and Partners, providing turnkey podcast creation, hosting, production, promotion, and related creative resources for you and your business. Today, Jeff is interviewing Joni Wickham. Joni worked for 8 years as Chief of Staff for Kansas City Mayor Sly James. After Mayor James' terms ended, the two of them stayed partners and created Wickham James Strategies and Solutions. Prior to moving to Kansas City, Joni had worked in several areas of politics, including working with the American Federation of Teachers, the Missouri Department of Transportation, and in the office of Missouri Secretary of State Robin Carnahan. She has been named one of the 50 most powerful people in Kansas City, and she is a member of the Kansas City Business Journal's prestigious class of 2023, Women Who Mean Business. You can learn more about Joni at wickhamjames.com. Let's listen as Jeff talks to Joni.
Joni, welcome to the Corporate Couch this morning.
Hey, Jeff, it's so nice to be here.
Yes. As we were chatting offline, you're the first guest that has reversed the order. You've done a short format special edition first, and then now we're doing the long format regular edition of your career and leadership journey. So, yeah, I'm very excited to talk to you. I met your companion, Mr. Sly James, first, and was lucky enough to meet you at Crux when you and Sly gave a talk. So yeah, very excited to talk to you. I've never asked this opening question to anyone, but since we have a little bit of history, I'll say, Joni, what side of the line are you on today? Are you a cupcake or are you a bitch? I just want to know.
Well, that's a great question. My answer usually is, it depends on you. But I know you well enough to know that you would never say or do anything that makes me navigate over to the bitch side of the line. So I am all cupcake here today, Jeff.
I love it. I love it. I love it. So, Joni, even people that know you fairly well, what one thing would surprise them about you?
I was just having this conversation yesterday. Someone was like, are you a early morning person or a night owl? And I'm like, neither. I am a 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. gal. I don't like early mornings. I don't like late at nights. I have to function as an early morning person because I have this sweet little girl who is not an early morning person. So I have to get up early in order to get myself in a
Right.
mindset to get her
Yeah.
together. Yeah, that's my little funny thing that I think would surprise people. I am not an early morning person, and I'm certainly not a night owl.
That's interesting. And it's weird too because, like you hear that question all the time, are you early morning? But you never kind of hear that, the mid roll, the midday person.
I don't know.
So I love that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Since we've known each other and I have heard you speak, I know a little bit about your childhood, but, tell the audience, where you grew up and what you loved doing growing up. What was fun for you?
Yeah, I grew up in a tiny town in eastern North Carolina, middle of nowhere. I was born to a single teenage mom, and we kind of grew up together. Honestly, she was 15 when she had me, and grew up in this trailer where my grandma still lives today. My husband, my daughter, and I go back fairly often to help navigate some elder care issues with her. And we had we were pretty poor back then, and so didn't really have access to a lot of things that a lot of middle class families have access to. There was no Girl Scouts, there were no ballet lessons, there were no violin lessons. So what I enjoyed doing was hanging out with my grandparents, talking, listening to them, learning from them. I think that's probably why I'm kind of an old soul, except for that whole early riser thing that we were just talking about. Yeah, so that's kind of what I liked to do growing up, was just kind of hanging out with them. Neither set of grandparents on my maternal or paternal side were functionally literate. So I did a lot of reading to them and just kind of helping them navigate different things. So that made me grow up kind of quickly.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how I spent my time, and no regrets about it at all.
Yeah.
Loved it.
Yeah. Any aspirations as a child? Like when I grow up, I want to be this.
So, for all the reasons that I just articulated, didn't have a whole lot of extracurricular activities. So, I spent a lot of time watching the three channels on TV that we had back then. That was way before Netflix and Hulu and all that stuff. And watched the evening news a lot with my grandparents, because just because you're poor and illiterate doesn't mean that you don't care about the world around you.
Sure.
And so we watched a lot of news shows, David Brinkley, Peter Jennings, those guys. And I was kind of obsessed with political journalism. And so for the longest time, I thought I was going to be on the news as a political journalist.
Oh, wow. That's cool. So, so you go to Meredith College. So was political science your initial major? I know you graduated with a poli sci major.
I initially went to college thinking I would major in communications and minor in political science so that I could go into political journalism. Funny story. My freshman year of college, I was able to get an internship in my teeny tiny hometown newspaper. And ironically, considering what I spent 8 years of my life doing, my editor sent me to cover a city council meeting with the finance committee. And I walked in, and there were seven older white gentlemen sitting at the table, the decision making table. And they had a major problem in that they had an $800,000 budget gap. And in that time, this would have been the late 90s, and it was a tiny town. That was a tremendous hole in their budget,
Right.
$800,000. And so they were trying to figure out what to do about it. And after a lot of conversation and deliberation, they found a line item which represented a program that neither of them had any context for it or experience with. And one of the guys referred to it as the Weiss program. And I was flipping through their budget book, and I will never forget the way that my heart felt in that moment when I realized what was going on. The program was not the Weiss program, it was WIC, Women, Infant, Children. And I knew very clearly what that program was, because it was a program that my family participated in that put food in my mouth, shelter over my head, clothing on my back, allowed me to go to early childhood education. And I knew what eliminating that program was going to do to the community that I grew up in. But none of the guys that were in the decision making seats knew what it meant, because that wasn't part of their lived experience. So I went back to my editor and I said, "You're not going to believe what just happened." And I explained to them the story that I just told you. And my editor was like, "Yeah, that's really crazy. But your role in the system is to go write about decisions after they're made. So you're on deadline. You need to go take a seat, little lady, and get at
Right.
your typewriter and start writing the story." And I have so much respect for journalism, the fourth estate. I think it's really, really important for a healthy democracy. But to have a role in the system where I was expected to write about terrible decisions after the fact did not sit well with my soul or my results oriented, action oriented personality. So I went back to my advisor and kind of explained this to her. She's like, "Well, we need to figure out a way to have you at that decision making table, rather than writing about the decisions after the fact." So I decided to kind of flip things a little bit and majored in political science and minored in political communication. And there's always been a communication aspect to the work that I've done, whether it be in the U.S. Senate, at the Missouri State Capitol, or at City Hall here in Kansas City. But I have appreciated opportunities that I have had to influence public policy.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. So, did you switch majors freshman year, or was it a little after that?
Pretty quickly, yeah.
Yeah, wow. So you knew pretty quickly. Yeah, wow. Yeah, so you graduate from Meredith College in lovely Raleigh, North Carolina, and did you go get your first job immediately?
I worked for then U.S. Senator John Edwards.
Yeah,
This was right about the time that people were really starting to think about him and talk about him as a presidential contender, and it's before people knew some of the craziness he was involved in his personal life.
right. What was that experience like? Like you're 22 years old, give or take, and you're working for a high-profile U.S. senator.
I learned from that experience that you can learn as much from poor leadership as positive, effective leadership. I learned so much about who to trust, who to look up to, what red flags to look for in situations like that. But it also taught me a lot about my willingness to stand my ground and to be someone who functions in a crazy world of politics that also has values and morals, which isn't something you always see. It was a difficult experience to navigate as such a naive young woman, but I'm so grateful, honestly, that I had that experience early in my career because it kind of set me up to be able to function at a high level no matter what was going on in the universe around me.
I know you eventually navigated to work for Robin Carnahan in Missouri, Secretary of State in Jefferson City, Missouri. But kind of what was your career path and got you to kind of Missouri? And I know you got your master's in political science at University of Missouri. So talk about that whole journey.
Yeah, sure did. So I took my last year of undergrad and studied abroad in Russia. So watching things unfold in the world right now is just really fascinating because some of the people and places in that part of the world that are all over the CBS nightly news are people and places that I have a lot of context for because I lived there for a year.
Right.
While I was in Russia, I decided that I wanted to go to graduate school. I applied for 8 graduate schools and got into the 4 that were geographically farthest away from home. And I kind of felt like somebody was trying to tell me something
Right.
at that. I was grateful to get a scholarship to go to graduate school at the University of Missouri Columbia, and I accepted it sight unseen. I had never stepped foot inside the state of Missouri before, but I figured if I could go to Russia and live there for a year, having never left the country, I could probably deal with going to the University of Missouri Columbia sight unseen.
Yeah. In
So
little Columbia, Missouri, or not
yeah,
that little,
yeah.
but yeah, it's all
Yeah,
relative.
it's grown
That's
so much
funny.
since then. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, got my master's degree from the University of Missouri Columbia. Was able to make some um, delightful lifelong friendships and connections while I was in Columbia, and got my first job out of graduate school at the American Federation of Teachers, doing some labor movement work in Jefferson City. Also was able to kind of move on to Robin Carnahan's office in the Missouri Secretary of State's office at the Capitol through networking and kind of opening my horizons to different opportunities at the state capitol. And I just really love that experience because it was the first time that I had worked side by side with a woman leader of that stature. That just didn't happen where I came from. I learned so much about what to do, what not to do, and what to be aware of in that circumstance. I'm really grateful for that opportunity even today.
Yeah, so you're working for Robin Carnahan, but then it looked like you did a, I don't know if it was a pivot, but you were like in the Missouri Department of Transportation as a highway specialist. What was your kind of impetus behind that change?
Yeah, so I spent a brief stint at the Department of Transportation in Jefferson City, helping with public policy, grant writing, and communications, specifically related to highway safety. At that point in time, highway safety initiatives were something that the federal government was really interested in, trying to decrease, if not eliminate, traffic fatalities. So that was a really great experience and gave me a whole different lens of experience.
You probably know a lot more about Kansas City, Missouri, or Missouri politics than me, since I'm a transplanted New Yorker, even though I've lived here a long time now in the area. So, but so you get an opportunity to work for, arguably one of the best mayors Kansas City, Missouri has ever seen, I would say, based on my brief, historical knowledge of it. But talk about that and how that all transpired and how you kind of went from, kind of the communications director as part of Sly James's staff to his chief of staff.
Yeah, so when I was in Jefferson City, I got a call from a friend who was connected to the Carnahan world, but also had been working on Sly's campaign and was asked if I might want to come to Kansas City to interview with this guy named Sly James, who was going to be the new mayor of Kansas City. And initially, I was not convinced that that was going to be the right move because one, I was pretty sick of politics. The partisanship, the vitriol, I was just kind of over it. And I didn't have a huge awareness of local politics in Kansas City. But I came to meet with him, and I promise you within 5 minutes, I thought to myself, I am buying what he's selling. And if he offers me this job, I'm going to be here as soon as I can get here. And the rest was history. So I started working in the mayor's office on the second day of the Sly James administration. We were still, I'll never forget, we were still trying to find keyboards for our computers. We were still trying to find glasses to put in the little kitchenette area of the mayor's office because we didn't have any. It was very much a startup operation. And I worked in the communications shop for about a year and a half. And Sly called me in his office one day and said that his first chief of staff was going to move on to the private sector and kind of asked my thoughts about how I would feel about being his chief of staff. And I kind of, I don't know, just kind of couldn't believe that this dream job that I had wanted for so long was right there before me. So, only hiccup was I had a little bitty infant at home, and I didn't really have a lot of role models or experience with professional women working and raising kids at the same time. So it scared me to death. I didn't know how I was going to do it. Um, and I went home that night and told my sweet husband about this conversation I had with the mayor. And he's like, we will figure it out. We can do this. This is your dream job. Go back tomorrow and tell the mayor that you'll do it. And I did.
Obviously, you and Sly work together now. You co-founded Wickham James Strategy and Solutions. I think that 2 days after you left the Kansas City, Missouri office. But we'll get to that. But like just some of the lessons you learned from not only Sly, but who were some of maybe your female mentors, and in terms of your role models for that.
Yeah, that's a great question. I have been so lucky to have to be surrounded by so many women who have worked in this space and adjacent professional spaces. For sure, Cindy Serco is one of them, my dear friend. She was Sly's mayor pro tem in our first city council. We got to know each other working on a couple of big development projects. And I learned so much from her about negotiating and taking up space as a woman leader, learning how to navigate that line that we mentioned earlier. And I'll never forget, we were in a contentious negotiation on a project one evening. It was like 6 o'clock at night. And she knew that I had this little baby at home. And she kind of pulled me over to the side in the middle of a meeting that we had. And she's like, you need to go home with that baby. This is a conversation that can happen without you. You've done all the behind the scenes work. This is going to get done. There comes a point at which you just prioritize yourself and your family, and the rest of it will fall into place. And she was right. And that was a real great piece of advice for me.
Yeah, that's really nice. I came to Kansas City. I grew up about an hour from New York City in a small city called Peekskill, New York. And I came here with, so I went to college in the Bronx and, the last stop on the one train. So we went to New York City, meaning Manhattan, a lot to do, what college people do, drink a lot, cause havoc. But yeah, every city's different, right? But there's only one New York City, there's only one Vegas, there's only one Paris, one Rome. But when I came to Kansas City, I liked it, but I was like, it's such a different city, and I'd never traveled growing up, so I was like, probably that was the biggest city I've ever seen outside of New York City and I always thought it was strange, like the downtown was not like New York City. Not that all downtowns are going to be like New York
Right.
City, but it was just, at 5 o'clock, the streets were kind of empty and it was just different. But I think what I loved about what you guys did, I just thought you just had a vision and made Kansas City, kind of a destination, or, where people could, go to the Sprint Center, now T-Mobile Center, and the streetcar. So talk about all that, the initiative, the airport. Oh my God. I think you and I talked one time. I had a recent person I got connected to. She travels all over the world, and she flew into Kansas City for a conference at UMKC. And she said, that is the best airport I've ever been to. So just, talk about your accomplishments and just, the behind the scenes, because everybody sees the shiny airport and the streetcar is magnificent, the Lowe's conventions. I mean, it's just, it's just beautiful, but obviously it just didn't happen overnight. So talk about some of those accomplishments, because they're just so amazing.
Yeah, thank you. I think the heart of our administration and the soul of Sly's vision was that all ideas were on the table if it was going to help move the city forward. Um, when we first started in office, he would talk a lot about how, in order to change people's actions, we had to change their thought processes. And before May of 2011, we had gotten into a rut where we wanted to compare ourselves to Lenexa or Olathe. And those are fine communities, but Sly's whole idea was that perhaps Kansas City, Missouri should be comparing itself to Denver or Austin or Nashville, or maybe Nashville, Denver, and Austin should be comparing themselves to us. And so we just really took that to heart and decided that we were going to be innovative, creative, and we were going to work our asses off. And it was so nice. I'll tell you, after working in politics and government my whole career up to that point, it was so nice to work for an elected official who did not play politics and who did not come out of the womb wanting to be president of the United States. It was so freeing to be in an elected official's office who sincerely did not care about getting votes at the next election if it meant that we were going to do something bold and awesome for the city. And so that kind of leads me to a story when we decided that come hell or high water, we were going to figure out how to get a new airport terminal for Kansas City, Missouri, because we had just grown very sick of losing things because of our old airport. We lost conventions, we lost business headquarters, you name it. And I think it would have been fall of 2016, we did some polling that suggested that at that point in time, only 22% of likely Kansas City voters agreed with us that we needed a new airport terminal. And so we had to really lean into our stubbornness and creativity to come up with a plan that would change hearts and minds. And right after that polling came out, we were briefing some business and civic leaders in town. And one of them insinuated that if we went down that path, that we would be ruining our careers, Sly's included. And I was even told, this is almost a direct quote by a business and civic leader, Joni, I'm just so exhausted by all the mayor's big and bold ideas. And I thought, well, that's just too damn bad. that's kind of why we're here.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, we worked our tails off to really communicate and explain to people why that airport terminal was such a big deal for the future of the city. And then, lo and behold, on election night, we won with 76% of the vote.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it was just, like I said, so refreshing to put politics aside, singularly focus on moving the city forward, no matter what that meant from a political capital standpoint. And it was just the professional honor of my life.
Are you drowning in boring corporate communications? Palacio and Partners is here to rescue you. We transform internal podcasts from snooze fest to must-listen content that actually connects your team and strengthens your culture. Imagine podcast episodes that make your employees laugh while staying informed. Our founder, Jeff Palacio, doesn't just create podcasts, he creates conversations that break through the noise. Whether you're a growing startup or a massive corporation, we turn your company's story into audio gold. Leadership becomes human. Remote teams feel connected. Your message cuts through the clutter. Palacio and Partners, where corporate communications gets a fun makeover. Let's make your podcast work harder than your email inbox ever could. Jeff is happy to share his insights on podcasting with you. You can contact him via LinkedIn or schedule a Zoom call via the link in the episode description.
You talk a little bit about it because when I talked to Sly, it's what amazed me about, here's a person that has no experience in politics, basically. I mean, in terms of having held office, I'm pretty sure he did not.
Correct.
And then
That's right.
Gets he's the mayor of the 37th largest city in the U.S. I mean, how did what were your observations and how did you guys both navigate things together? Because basically you had more experience working for elected officials than him being elected an elected official. So talk about that.
I wish I had a quarter for every time Sly has told people that he was the engine and I'm the brakes. He would come up with 4,000 brilliant, let me just tell you, brilliant ideas a day. And then there would be times I'd be like, let's talk about this idea. We can't do that, or we can't do that in that way, often was what I would suggest. But that dynamic that you were just talking about, I think is one of the beauties of our partnership. We are very different, but very complementary. We have very different experiences and personalities. But we have always worked very well together. And I think it is because our friendship and our partnership is based off of mutual trust and respect.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's just, it's so good just seeing you guys together too, because, Sly is this ex-Marine, his band opened up for Jefferson Airplane. He's bigger in stature than you. He's kind of this presence and you're a presence in a different way, but you're very petite. He's, African-American, you're Caucasian. So it's a great dynamic. And when you guys present together, it's just a really great thing to watch. So I admire that
Thank you.
relationship. Uh,
Thank you.
you're like the Mahomes Kelsey of the business strategy world, and political strategy. So I love
That
that.
is quite the compliment.
Yeah.
Although I love DeAndre Hopkins. He is my favorite. I love that guy and his story. I think he's awesome. Don't get me wrong, I love Kelsey and Mahomes too,
No,
but
I don't.
DeAndre Hopkins has my heart.
It's so we, my wife and I, like to frequent Martin City Brewery in Martin City, the OG, the original one. Love the pizza there. Highly recommend. I'm not getting paid, but Matt Kerr, if you want to sponsor the podcast, that'd be great. And we sit at the bar, and they have a little chalkboard, and they put a question: who's the most impactful Chief player this season? So my wife asked me, and then we got in a conversation in the with the bartender. But I said DeAndre Hopkins because I felt that when he came, it opened up the offense like that. They needed that receiver that the defense would respect. And he had great, his first two games with the Chiefs were phenomenal. I know his playoffs has not been stellar, but hey, here's to a big Super Bowl. We're recording this about 5-6 days before the Super Bowl
Yeah.
here. But yeah, but what's his backstory? I'm just curious.
So he comes from a tiny town in South Carolina. I'm from North Carolina. His mom had a real tough life, single mom, had him very young, and lots of drug use, selling drugs. And he posted on social media just the sweetest quote. I've got it here. This was just yesterday. He says, to all the kids out there living in small towns, in small houses with single parents, to the kids who see violence, who see loss, who don't get the resources they deserve, but who still have big dreams, know that I was a kid in your exact shoes, and this week I'm playing in the Super Bowl. Don't give up, work hard, keep believing. Where you start doesn't determine where you end up. I
Wow.
mean, I just love that.
Yeah.
I love it because if I had seen that when I was 9 years old,
Yeah.
it would have given me some additional energy and encouragement to keep going. So I just love it.
Yeah, that's phenomenal. It really is. Any other initiatives? I know I mentioned the streetcar, but what were some things that you were most proud of? I know it's like, you can't pick your favorite movie or favorite child, but it's, just some favorites.
Because of my background, I have always gravitated towards and loved working on projects that help women and children. We created a blueprint for women's empowerment when we were at City Hall that helped more women get appointed to local boards and commissions. It also helped support women entrepreneurs. And we also implemented the first paid leave program at City Hall, the very first one like it of any city in the country. So proud of that type of work. I also loved Turn the Page KC. That was our nonprofit that we created to rally the community around the concept of third grade reading levels and how important it is for children. I loved working on the Urban Youth Baseball Academy over in 18th and Vine, using sports as a tool to change kids' lives, those types of projects. The streetcar, the Lowe's Hotel, which I just adore, and the airport, those types of what I call hard infrastructure, those initiatives get so much attention. And Turn the Page, the Women's Empowerment Blueprint, and the Urban Youth Academy may not get quite as much attention, but they're so impactful because they are quite literally can be life-changing tools for kids
Yeah.
and women.
Yeah, and since I've heard you and Sly talk and have interviewed Sly, I do know about Turn the Page. But talk about some of the statistics in terms of third grade reading level and why that's so important in terms of development and learning.
Yeah, when we took office in May of 2011, only 33% of Kansas City's third graders were reading at grade level. And that is the entirety of Kansas City, Missouri, not just one school district. And so we were working with the National League of Cities and learned about how third grade reading proficiency is so intertwined and interconnected with longer term educational access. And you don't have to be a rocket scientist to understand that the more enriching educational opportunities that children have, the less likely they are to enter a life of crime, less likely they are to live in poverty, and more likely they are to have more workforce opportunities. So Sly caught a lot of flack at the beginning of his administration for having such a focus on education. And his detractors would say, you need to focus on potholes and trash pickup because you're not the superintendent. And our motto in the mayor's office was name one thing that is not impacted by this city's kids' education level. If you want to complain about crime, then you also have to do something about educational opportunities. If you are a business leader and you've got workforce problems, you might want to take a look at children's educational opportunities. Because if you can't read by the end of third grade, you're going to have a hell of a time fitting into the 21st century workforce needs, those sorts of things.
Right. So what was it like when you it's a 2-term limit, right? So I can't run again. You're not going to be, Kansas City, Missouri chief of staff or the mayor. When did the kind of idea start forming about you and Sly continuing on and, creating Wickham James? When did that process start?
It started at about 11 a.m. the morning after the airport election. We won the election. We went to the election night watch party, took a breath, gave each other a big hug, celebrated with our team. And the next day, we had a press conference in the city manager's office where we had to talk to reporters about what the process looked like after the election win. And we went in Sly's office, in the mayor's office, and I remember he just looked at me and he goes, we really do make a good team. We should figure out how to continue working together when this chapter is over. And I was like, yeah, you're right. We should.
Yeah. Wow. Obviously, you did so many things. You, Sly, and the rest of the team to all these great initiatives. Was it hard to walk out, when it was all over?
I was so tired and so burnt out. 8 years at that pace, and I had a baby in the middle of it. 8 years at that pace is incredibly difficult. Um, the typical length of time that an elected official, staff person stays on board is about 2.5 years. I was so burnt out, and we
Right.
did so much during that 8 years. We had 18 elections in 8 years and won 16 of them. That's on top of the day to day of just running a city of, at that point, close to 500,000 people. So I was immensely proud and grateful for the opportunity to serve in that capacity, but very ready to start a new chapter of life.
I meant to ask you this earlier. When you were doing all these initiatives, for people that don't live in Kansas City, it's a state line road separates Kansas from Missouri. So people are constantly crossing over, So when most people think of Kansas City, it's usually Missouri because of Arrowhead Stadium and T-Mobile Center and Roy Kaufman Stadium, so on. But what were the challenges there? Because you're obviously putting in an airport for everyone in the metropolitan area and even beyond, because people come to Kansas City to fly out. You're doing T-Mobiles for everyone, streetcars for everyone for the most part. What was that like to just kind of go to different states, elected official, and build bonds to make things happen?
In the moment, it didn't feel as hard as it may look. And I credit Sly's collaborative leadership style. He always wanted to get things done, no matter what it took to get those things done. So if it meant going to Topeka to figure out a solution to a problem with the governor of Kansas, then we got in the car and went to Topeka and did it. We had fantastic working relationships with the elected officials on the Kansas side of the state line. One of the very first things our administration did was welcome Google Fiber to the region with then Kansas City, Kansas Mayor Joe Reardon. And when you have that type of exciting initial regional milestone and accomplishment, it sets the tone for how things are going to go. So we always had really fantastic regional working relationships. And I think because of our administration's willingness to be collaborative, to be communicative, I think it went far when it came to working together as a region and solving regional problems.
Yeah. No, yeah, it's amazing accomplishments. So it looked like I know your book was published in July of 2020. When did you get the idea to write that book?
I think I first started getting the idea to write that book 20 years before I started writing it. There are so many stories I put in that book and some that I didn't. Maybe that'll be book two. So many stories that just highlight what it's like to be a woman in leadership positions. And I can remember at certain points throughout my career and throughout my journey thinking, there's no way I'm the only woman this has happened to. And for sure, there are women who have a tougher road to hoe than I do. And so I wanted to write this book. It's kind of cathartic, honestly. But
Right.
I wanted to write it to help women understand that they're not alone, but also to also kind of be a vehicle between women and men. Um, and my hope was that men would read this book and be like, oh, I never realized that.
Yeah.
And then almost create their own personal action plan to help everyone succeed. Because I think when everyone in an organization has the opportunity to maximize their potential, it just helps everyone. And so I started writing the book shortly after we left office. And then COVID hit in January of 2020, and I had a first grader at home. And that required me getting up at like 5 o'clock in the morning to work on my book from like 5 to 8 a.m. or 9 a.m., depending on when my client work started happening, because we really wanted to be able to leverage the 2020 election cycle because there were so many women on the ballot. And so
Right.
we thought that women's leadership would be a top line narrative at that point in time, and it was. And I think that helped lead to the success of the book, particularly initially.
Yeah. No, that's great. So was your writing process kind of like you just set aside 5 a.m. to 8 a.m. Monday through Friday or whatever, and
Yeah,
just crank
sometimes
out?
10 p.m. to midnight, even though I'm not a
Right.
late night person either. Yeah.
You didn't maximize the 10 a.m. to 2 because you were working.
And I had a kid in virtual school during all
Right.
that. Yeah.
Oh God. Yeah, I don't know if it's a part of the description you wrote for the book, but I caught one sentence or partial sentence. The book reaches out to women, reaches out to empower women and insightful men.
Hmm. Yeah.
And I have always said that women are the most evolved species in the world type thing. So but yeah, I think that's great. And then the book title came from an actual meeting you attended, right? So the title, to remind people, is the thin line between Btch and Cupcake: taking actions, driving change, and getting results. So maybe talk about the title.
Yeah. I was at City Hall in the mayor's office, um, facilitating a very contentious meeting about one of our big development projects. And after the meeting ended, there were two guys who wanted to talk to me. And one guy said, I can't believe you were so bitchy during that meeting. You alienated everybody and you're never going to get the mayor's agenda implemented. And the other guy was like, I can't believe that you let everybody run all over you. You're never going to get the mayor's agenda implemented. And I thought, good Lord, both of these statements cannot be true. To my knowledge, I'm not schizophrenic. So, like,
Right.
I'm one person, but was perceived very different ways by
Yeah.
two very different people.
Yeah.
And that was kind of the moment that I thought, all right, I'm going to stop thinking about writing the
Yeah.
book and put a plan in place
Yeah.
to actually get the book done.
Yeah, no, I love that. So you kind of jokingly mentioned maybe a second book, but are you seriously thinking about another book?
I would love to write another book. Sly and I have kicked around the idea of writing a book together. I would love to do that. We just need to figure out logistics and how to operationalize it, but I
Right.
would love to do it.
All right. You heard it here first, people, on the corporate couch. Breaking news. Uh, no, that's great. Yeah, and Sly, I know, has at least two
He
books.
has two books.
Yeah,
Yeah, he
yeah,
is a prolific writer, even though
yeah.
he can't type. How's that happen?
Well, when I asked him about some of the initiatives like the Google Fiber and Smart City,
Yeah.
I go, "Are you a data guy, like a tech guy?" He goes, "Oh no, I'm not. I'm not."
No, he
But that's how
is
brilliant,
not.
it's just so smart of him to think that way, though, because not that he's not passionate about it, he's passionate about the results, but he doesn't need to be, like the subject matter expert on it,
Right, right.
or far from it. It sounds like. Um, so you formed Wickham James Strategy and Solutions. So talk about how you help clients and kind of where you think you and Sly's sweet spot is in that area.
The bulk of our work is in strategic communications, crisis communications, public policy work, government relations. We do a little bit of political consulting, and we also do quite a bit of facilitation work, conflict resolution, and mediations. However, I will tell you, my favorite phone call to take is a client or a potential client calling me and saying, "Hey, Joni, I've got this tricky problem and I just want to see if you can help me." And I love those types of conversations
Right.
because I enjoy big challenges. So does Sly. We both enjoy putting our previous experience to work, having to navigate 18 hot potatoes before 10 a.m., usually under a lot of pressure and usually with a lot of contentious conversations. And so we focus on those areas I just mentioned, but like I was saying, I really do enjoy just the random phone call from a contact that has a problem and they know that we know how to solve big challenges and they
Right.
call to see if we can help them.
Joni, I love helping two groups of people. One's that recent college graduate that is now going to start their professional career, and any advice you would give them on that professional career start, as well as getting that first job.
I love that question. I'm going to pivot just a little bit. When I meet with young people who are fresh out of college trying to figure out what to do, rather than giving them advice for the immediate future, I ask them where they think they want to be in 5 or 10 years. Because I think having at least an idea of where you think you might want to be in 5 or 10 years will help you put the puzzle pieces together in the short term so that you can reach those goals.
Yeah, no, I love that. Now, I'm curious, and um, I'm speaking out of my own experience when I graduated college, as well as being a male. Do Can they even think that far ahead and like what they want to be in 5 and 10 years?
I think it depends on the person, but I will tell you this, even knowing what you don't want to do,
Yes.
I think that's helpful. Being able to
Yeah.
eliminate things,
Yeah.
even knowing like where you think you might want to live,
Yeah.
that sort of thing. It's not just about where you want to work, but it's the type of life that you think you might want to live
Yeah.
in 5 or 10 years is helpful.
Sure. 100% agree. That second group is the group that wants to be a manager and actually be responsible for a team of people. Anyone can be a leader, whether you have direct reports or not. But the ones that want to take that leadership journey where they do have direct reports and responsible, what advice do you have for them as they begin their leadership journey that way?
My advice would be to hone your communication skills. I think communication skills are severely lacking in the world generally and in the workforce in particular. Nothing bad will come from being a better active listener, from learning how to communicate articulately, concisely, and with empathy. I really believe that communication skills are one of the strongest elements to leadership.
Yeah, 100% agree. Every employee survey ever taken, the top one or two or maybe three topic that needs to be improved is communication. So I love that.
Yeah.
Joni, been great. So honored that you came on the corporate couch. I really appreciate it. And I look forward to our next conversation off camera.
I'll be looking forward to it, Jeff. Thanks for having me.
Joe, who wouldn't want to talk to the author of A Thin Line Between a Bitch and a Cupcake?
And that's something.
I mean, I love that. Joni is just fantastic. Just, her mother had her when her mom was 15 years old, pregnant with Joni at 14, grew up in this small, I think, one-bedroom house in rural North Carolina. They're like the dream team. So they got Joni and their partner in crime, one of the greatest mayors in Kansas City history, Missouri history, Sly James. And as I said in the episode, they're like the Mahomes, Kelsey of business and large, initiatives, strategy in their consulting practice. They did so many great things in Sly James's 2 terms where she was the chief of staff for him. They turned the whole thing around. The airport was decaying, and after 9/11, our airport, the old airport, was not conducive to the security, and the amenities inside security was terrible.
Right.
I mean, they built it up over years, obviously, but
it was built. It was built with literally a metal detector at every gate originally.
Yeah, right.
Right. Because that's how you did it in the 70s.
Yeah. But they had big ideas, which I love, like prior administrations or prior thinking was, let's be like, Lenexa, Kansas, because it was new and modernized, or Olathe, Kansas, another nice suburb in the Kansas City metro. And they said, no, we want to emulate ourselves on Austin and Denver and Nashville. And not only emulate, compared to those cities, like we want those type cities to emulate after us. So they came up with this airport, new airport, let's get one, where they did a poll. Only 22% of Kansas City, Missouri residents thought we needed a new airport. 22%. So they had this is 2016. They had a lot of work to do, and they turned that around. And that airport's one of the best airports in the country right now. It's beautiful. You don't even feel like you're in Kansas City. It's so good. They came up with the streetcar, the Lowe's Hotel, and convention center. That's beautiful. All the things they did for reading, the studies that if you're not reading in 3rd grade at a certain level, you're going to be behind for the rest of your life. So they poured their, heart and soul into that, and into kids and their education. And they were big women's advocates too. They're a lovely team. And Joni's just, I could talk to her all day, especially with that Southern accent. But what'd you get out of the episode, Joe?
It was amazing, and yes, she's an amazing person, and they're an amazing pair of people. It's interesting that I don't know exactly all their dynamics, but my guess is that they feed off of each other, and they balance each other. So where one's strong, the other one's weak, and one's weak, the other's strong, and they've got that kind of synergy.
Yeah, I think Sly, well, she said in the episode, Sly says, I'm the brake and he's the gas.
Yeah. What you can't argue with, though, is what they got done that nobody else got done.
Right.
How long had we been talking about a new airport in Kansas City? Probably 25, 30, 35 years. The airport itself was built, did we say in 72 or early 70s anyway, that's there. And it was almost immediately out of date. Like I said, that it had security literally at every gate. The advantage that they had when it was built was that you could literally park your car and walk to your gate within a couple hundred feet.
Oh, yeah. It was the easiest airport to get into.
Yeah, but turned out, after 9/11, that turned out to be its biggest flaw, is because it didn't have centralized security. So what they ended up doing was creating a new terminal. It's essentially the same airport. It's the same runways and all that stuff, but a brand new terminal that has integrated security for everything, and all the gates funneling out of that.
It's one terminal.
Right.
Yep.
But the neat thing about it is that they got it done. and when nobody else did. We had mayors come and go and go and come that always talked about it. Same thing with the streetcar. We had mayors come and go and come that talked about building a streetcar, talked about light rail or whatever it was. Yeah. And nobody ever got anything done. You kind of think of Congress. Congress over years have talked about lowering taxes and finding waste, fraud, and everything in the government, and nobody's ever done it before. They're not fixing anything, whether a Democrat or Republican. Nobody's fixing anything. Sly comes in, they actually got things done. What a concept.
Yeah, like the airport, 78% of the people in Kansas City that they polled said they didn't think we needed it.
Didn't think we needed it. Now, by the way, we're talking, what's one of the big stories in Kansas City now is what to do with the Chiefs and the Royals and their stadiums.
Right.
And we have been talking about building a new stadium for the Royals and the Chiefs for 25 years.
Yeah.
And where is Sly James when you need him? That we need to, we either need to do it or not do it. But bless their hearts that they got things done, and I think that's wonderful.
Joe, what thoughts do you have now for our great listening audience?
I want to tell you something. You probably don't even know this yet, even though we work together a lot. I just got a new job.
Really? What are you doing?
I got a job at the bicycle factory. And working at the bicycle factory, they've already made me a spokesperson.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of The Corporate Couch. If you enjoy the podcast, I would love for you to take 2 minutes out of your day to rate us 5 stars and write a review. Please join me next week to learn from another great leader sharing their professional journey and insights.